countries like China that won't stick to their obligations under international agreements and play by the rules. If our country is going to compete in the global economy, we have to guarantee that manufacturers are not disadvantaged by an uneven playing field in foreign trade. We must demand that China play by the rules. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Utah.
Madam Speaker, I reserve my time so I can find another baseball metaphor.
Gentleman reserves his
sort
time.
of like Joe DiMaggio was against vouchers.
The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased at this time. I would like to yield myself 10 seconds to explain that we're still on the D.C. voucher matter, but the previous question is with reference to Chinese currency. At that, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman, my good friend from Washington, Mr. McDermott.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized for 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, the Republican follies go on. The Republicans have done nothing in 13 weeks in charge of the House to help Americans get jobs. Nothing to open markets for businesses to expand, nothing to open up markets overseas for American workers and businesses to compete more fairly. While they hold the economy hostage to their cultural war agenda, maybe we could do something to help the American people. I rise today in support of the effort to defeat the previous question so that we can take a first step toward addressing the egregious imbalance between China's currency and our own. For too long, the Chinese have been playing unfairly in the international trade arena, and this Congress has to send a clear message that China must become a responsible player in multilateral trade. The Chinese export-driven strategy is smart, but subsidizing it by suppressing their currency is an unfair way to do it. The effort we are doing here is a good step, and we should follow up by working together with our trading partners to bring a multilateral WTO case against China on the currency issue. This common-sense legislation helps the Commerce Department do a fair job for making the multilateral mechanisms more available to U.S. business. We must send a clear signal that the American people expect that Chinese will respect international agreements and expect fairness. After years of an unlevel playing field, it is time to act, and this motion to defeat it and bring it to the floor is the right kind of measured first step we can take now. I hope the Republicans will join us in helping this economy. I'm tired of reading the Constitution and all the silly things we've done for the last 13 weeks. When are we going to see anything having to do with job creation? I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Utah.
Madam Speaker, I'll reserve.
Gentleman from Utah reserves. The gentleman from Florida.
Yes, Madam Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to my very good friend from New Jersey, the distinguished gentleman, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my friend for yielding. Some of the 15 million unemployed Americans no doubt got together with some of their friends this morning around a kitchen table and talked about another fruitless day of job searching, another sleepless night, another paycheck-less Friday that's coming. And I wonder, Madam Speaker, what they would think about what's going on the floor of this House today. At a time when there are 15 million Americans out of work, the House majority has decided to pretend that it's the District of Columbia Board of Education. Now, there are profound issues about the quality of schools for children in the District of Columbia. I would be guided by their elected representative, Ms. Holmes Norton, who speaks for them but tragically does not have the right to vote on their behalf. She should have that right. But beyond that, what are we doing? This is a time when Americans are struggling and suffering and losing their homes. What we should be doing is coming together, Republicans and Democrats on this floor, to create an environment where entrepreneurs and small businesses can create jobs for the American people. We have a proposal on the floor right now that would say the following. Let's stop China from unfairly manipulating its currency that puts American manufacturers at a disadvantage. It's estimated that 1 million manufacturing jobs could be added in this country if the Chinese were made to stop their unfair practice of discriminating and manipulating currency. Now, you may think that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. But why don't we take a vote on that instead of how to run the District of Columbia public schools? That's a question that the voters of the District of Columbia should decide for themselves. What we ought to decide is to get our act together and get Americans back to work. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Utah.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I am not objecting at all to the concepts and the comments about the Chinese trade. I think that's a legitimate issue. It has its time and place. Perhaps not necessarily on this particular bill, but as an approach that the opposition, the minority, wishes to take, I can understand that. I do, though, have my baseball analogy still here. And I'm not going to count the DiMaggio because that was made up. That was not a true one. But it is true that Casey Stengel at one time, talking about, I think, one of the best second basemen ever, Bobby Richardson, said, I just can't understand it. He doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink, he doesn't stay out at night, and he still can't hit .250. Now, even though a healthy lifestyle may extend a career, it still has no ability or connection to the ability of hitting a curveball. But those kind of non-sequenters are part and parcel of the entire debate that we will be having, not just on this rule, but also extended onto the other debate as well. I find it personally very difficult to understand why anyone would oppose this bill, which only expands choices for D.C.'s brightest and least financially blessed school kids, and does not subtract from school funding for D.C. public schools. In fact, it increases funding while keeping within federal budget disciplines. It increases the percentage of money going to the charter school program as well as to the public schools. This is a win-win-win situation because it sends money to three distinct efforts: the regular public schools, the charter schools, which have a waiting list more than ever before, and also this Opportunity Scholarship Program, which had a waiting list and will again as well. With that, I still reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Utah reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, he's absolutely correct, my friend is, about the Joe DiMaggio comment. But I've been around long enough to remember the Washington Senators. And I won't give him anything. One of my personal friends played baseball with him, Earl Batty. And I won't tell you some of the things that Earl said to me when it wasn't about school vouchers. But I leave to the seriousness of the moment, the remaining, not remaining time, but 5 minutes of my remaining time, to Ms. Holmes Norton, who has with great persistence tried to get clarity about taxation without representation. Thank you, and I yield 5 minutes to Ms. Norton.
Gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, you know, in the later days of European colonialism, countries like France allowed some representation from the colonies, because the whole notion of voting on the fate of the colonies with nobody there who could also vote seemed even then to be a dilemma they could not live with. And I don't understand how any member of the House believes she has a right to vote on local education matters or any other local matter affecting any part of the United States, including the District of Columbia. I note, Mr. Chairman, that Mr. Polis of our committee indicated yesterday that there was a county in Colorado that had created its own voucher program. I respect that, because they didn't come to the federal government to ask that that local voucher program be funded, nor, Madam Speaker, did we. I think every member of this House ought to ask, since we've had 5 years of a voucher bill, why is there no national bill on the floor? I think the gentleman from Florida has said one of the good reasons And that is certainly that the Bush Department of Education found that when compared with the students in comparable schools in D.C., there was no increase in test scores in math or science. So there's a merit reason why there's no national bill. But there's another reason why. The majority doesn't have the nerve to put a national voucher bill on the floor because it knows that in each and every referendum, including the referendum in Utah, my good friend, from which my good friend comes, not once has such a referendum succeeded. I don't know why the majority thinks it can go home now and say, I voted for vouchers when you yourselves were against the use of public money for private schools. I would not like to be at that town meeting where you have to explain why you voted for a rule for $300 million for one district that did not want that money for that purpose. Madam Speaker, I very much resent the use of Article 8 whenever the majority wants to move in on the District of Columbia with one of its pet ideas or because it disagrees with some issue in the District of Columbia. That's quintessentially the absence of democracy. It's one thing to have no democracy. It's another thing to press your version of policy on another jurisdiction. That's why I have an alternative that I will substitute that I will be bringing at an appropriate time. Mr. Chairman, in 1974, after 150 years, this Congress finally said we have been wrong for most of the existence of our country in allowing no democracy whatsoever in the District of Columbia. No mayor, no city council. We give up. We delegate self-government to you. We are out of your affairs. Self-government means nothing if the District of Columbia can still be a dumping ground for every pet project and pet idea of the majority. We have our own pet ideas, and we will insist on the respect for our own ideas and not yours. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The gentleman from Utah.
I'm going to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I would advise my friend from Utah that I'm going to be the last speaker, and I will yield myself the remaining time.
Madam Speaker,
gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
If I might, just to give you some planning ability, I do have one other person who's coming down that wants to speak as well as myself, and I'd be willing to talk for a few minutes. In fact, I'd be willing not to talk for a few minutes to give you another chance.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Utah.
With that, Madam Speaker, I would like to yield something to myself. No, I won't yield something to myself. I'd like to yield I have, Madam Speaker, can I inquire if I have around 15 minutes still left?
The gentleman has 15 minutes remaining.
So I will yield 10 minutes if the gentleman from California wants it. Otherwise, I'll be happy to use what he does not use.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 10 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise the semi-remarks.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, first let me thank my friend for his superb management of this rule, and to say that I have the utmost respect for my colleague from the District of Columbia. As I say that since I reside here in the District of Columbia, she represents me here in this institution, and when I'm here, of course I'm a Californian first and foremost, but when I'm here I get her newsletters in the mail, and she and I have served on we served on a commission together focused on reform of this Congress in the 1990s, and I do have the utmost respect for her, and that is one of the main reasons that we chose, when she offered the one amendment to this measure, to make it order, because there's been a commitment that Speaker Boehner and I and others have made that we want to have a free-flowing debate. And I think that the notion of concluding that somehow this is a cut-and-dried issue was really wrong. I have to say that I felt as I sat in the Rules Committee last night and listened to my good friend and I listened to Mr. McGovern, I was really saying, my gosh, well, maybe there is no support for this measure at all, especially when Mr. McGovern, the second-ranking Democrat on the Rules Committee, said every city council member in the District of Columbia is opposed to this measure. In fact, he said it not once, but 2, maybe even 3 times. And then I was handed a list, and I know that I've just been told that Mr. Bishop raised at the beginning there are going to be lists on either side, but the notion to conclude, Madam Speaker, that we somehow are imposing the will of the majority on the people of the District of Columbia, there's no support for this whatsoever, which is what I inferred from what was offered in the Rules Committee last night, is just plain wrong. I don't often cite the editorial work of the Washington Post, but the Washington Post has editorialized strongly in support of this notion. Why? Because they're committed, as I believe we all are, Democrats and Republicans alike. I believe that all of my colleagues are committed to improving educational opportunities for our fellow Americans. And I think that what we need to recognize is that educational choice is an important thing, and that's why the Washington Post has editorialized in support of this. And then when one looks at the list of D.C. leaders, some currently holding office, some formerly having held elective office here in the District of Columbia, and the notion that there's only one voice that's elected by the people of the District of Columbia is an inaccurate one. The fact is, the chairman of the City Council, Chairman at Large, Kwame Brown, is a supporter of this measure. The former mayor, Adrian Fenty, I recognize that he did not win re-election. I don't know that this was the sole determinant in the outcome of that election, but Adrian Fenty, in fact, is a supporter of this measure. The mayor before that, Anthony Williams, is a supporter of this measure. Marion Barry, the former mayor. Kevin Chavis, former chairman of the D.C. Council Education Committee. Patrick Mara, the D.C. School Board member. And, of course, the often-cited Michelle Rhee, the former D.C. school chancellor, happens to be supporters. They all happen to be supporters of this measure. And so that's why some elected, some not elected, some hold office today, some formerly held office. But I believe, Madam Speaker, that every single one of these people, along with the editorial pages, as I said, of the Post, the Journal, a number of other publications, lots of organizations, are very, very committed to ensuring the quality of education is improved in the District of Columbia, and, Madam Speaker, they are very, very committed to ensuring that we see the quality of education improve across this country. It's very important for us to do that, and that's why I find it very interesting that the previous question battle that we're dealing with here is one that is designed to focus on the issue of international trade and creating jobs here in the United States. And I can understand there's a great deal of concern about the fact that jobs have fled overseas. That's happened because of the policies of the United States of America. The fact that we have the highest tax rate on job creators of any country in the world. The fact that we have chosen over the last few years to stick our heads in the sand when it's come to market opening opportunities through trade agreements which have been signed by our past administration and the leaders of other countries is an indication that we've chosen to ignore great job-creating opportunities. And I'm speaking these trade agreements, the ones that President Obama said that he would like to see us pass here in the House. First, the Korea-U.S. trade agreement, free trade agreement, which he talked about, and I'm grateful that he talked about the importance of Colombia and Panama. Two agreements that were actually signed before the completion of the U.S.-Korea free trade agreement. Now, Madam Speaker, if we were to focus attention on those items, plus reducing that top rate on job creators from 35% to 25%, that would do more to create job opportunities than almost anything we could do. And then we get back to the core issue here, and that is education. We need to make sure that the United States of America, as we seek to remain competitive in this global economy, that we have the best educated young people, and that's why educational choice, I believe, is critically important. And so we're going to have an opportunity for debate. The Rules Committee has chosen to make an order and give 40 minutes of debate to my friend from the District of Columbia, so we'll be able to continue this exchange. I urge my colleagues to vote yes in favor of the previous question, and in so doing, we'll be able to pursue tremendous items like the pending 3 free trade agreements and reducing the top rate on corporate income, those on job creators, so that we can generate more job opportunities in this country. And so vote yes on the previous question, vote yes on the rule, and I believe that the underlying legislation will dramatically enhance the opportunity for young people in the District of Columbia to have educational opportunities that they otherwise would not have. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
California yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Florida.
Would you please tell me, Madam Speaker, how much time I have remaining?
The gentleman from Florida has 2 minutes remaining.
I yield 1 minute of that time to Ms. Holmes-Norton.
Gentlelady from D.C. is recognized for 1 minute.
No one ever said that everybody in the District of Columbia or even every public official was against vouchers. The President
Sure.
Would the gentleman yield? I thank my friend for yielding, and I just said that Mr. McGovern in the debate last night in the Rules Committee said that every city council member, and then I was given this list, and I thank my friend for yielding.
On the contrary, a letter is on its way up here from city council members. The present mayor opposes the bill. Yes, the former mayor was for the bill. The largest demonstration of citizens since I have been in the Congress was held when this bill was imposed on the District of Columbia. You will ask people, if you ask people in the District of Columbia, would you support some federal money for vouchers? A lot of them will say yes. If you ask them the right question, would you want money for private school vouchers, or would you want money for public charter schools? Hands down, they will say relieve those long waiting lists of all of us trying to get in our public charter schools and give the money to our public charter schools. Nobody on that side of the aisle knows anything about the residents of the District of Columbia, or they never would have put this bill in the first place. I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Utah.
I will reserve, and I will tell the gentleman from Florida that I'm prepared to close when he is.
Thank you very much.
Then gentleman from Florida.
I shall conclude. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd say to the chairman before he leaves the room that if any American corporation is paying 35% corporate tax, they need to fire their accountants. Madam Speaker, if the people of the District of Columbia wanted a school voucher program, they would have created one without the interference of Congress. This pilot program was allowed to expire for a reason. It didn't work. Why the self-proclaimed party of fiscal conservatism would support authorizing millions, 300 of those, in new spending for a downright useless program with no offset is beyond me. It's time for Republicans to take their hands out of the internal affairs of the district and instead focus on what our constituents sent us here to do, rebuild our economy and put Americans back to work. At a time when our nation's schools and communities find themselves in dire fiscal straits, we should not be throwing money away to revive a program that has by all objective measures failed. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and once again, I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate my good friend from Florida. If for no other reason that all of a sudden people are now sending me baseball stories and analogies here. So I have one from Casey Stengel, which I will save for the next time we join together here on the floor. Madam Speaker, it is fairly clear what we are dealing with in this particular bill. This is money that is within our federal budgetary discipline. We are talking with this bill about money that would go to the public education system, traditional public education system in the District of Columbia, an equal amount of money that would go to the charter school, which does have a waiting list here in the District of Columbia, as well as money that would go to this new opportunity, scholarship. And once again, with our dueling statistics, whether one wants to say it is successful or not, the bottom line is still, there were parents who wanted that program. There were parents who complained when the program was taken away from them by Congress. And there are parents who still want this program reestablished. They want those options for their children. We have a choice here. If we act favorably on this bill, we empower those parents. If we refuse to act favorably on this bill, then we limit those parents and the choices that they seem to want. And that is one of those issues that is there. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I want to reiterate the fairness of this structured rule. I urge its adoption along with the underlying legislation. I urge members to support this rule, which will allow the House to consider good legislation that affords bright and competitive D.C. students with an enhanced opportunity to pursue a higher quality of education while not harming the underlying public education system in the District of Columbia. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution, and those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it.
On that, Madam Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman ask for the ayes and nays?
Yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring the vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on ordering the previous question will be followed by 5-minute votes on adoption of House Resolution 186, if ordered, and approval of the journal by the yeas and the nays.
Three votes on the House floor. They've been debating a bill that would reauthorize a Washington, D.C. school voucher and scholarship program. It's the first bill to be brought up by House Speaker John Boehner so far this Congress. Three votes here. This one's 15 minutes, previous question vote, and the rule vote will follow that. If the rule is passed, that'll mean an hour of general debate, and they will consider one amendment, that by District Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton. That'll get 40 minutes of debate. So an hour 40 of debate coming up if the rule passes here, and that's the second vote in this series of three. Also today in the House, a bill that would prohibit the EPA from requiring a permit for the use of registered pesticides in navigable waters. That's coming up for debate, at least later on today. Must be opening week in baseball this week, because in some of the earlier debate between Rob Bishop and Alcee Hastings, they traded baseball stories and quips mentioning Leo DeRocher and Yogi Berra. You'll be able to follow along all of that in our Congressional Chronicle online. Once it's posted, once the debate is posted in the video library, just go to our Congressional Chronicle and you can follow that, whether you're a baseball fan or not. You also find in that video library this afternoon President Obama's speech from this morning at Georgetown University, his energy speech. The Associated Press reports that the President says the U.S. has to stop going from, quote, shock to trance over energy. He says the country rushes to propose action when gas prices rise, then hits the snooze button when they fall again. The President, in his speech, calling for a 1/3 reduction in U.S. oil imports by 2025 as part of a broad energy policy that also envisions a shift to cleaner burning fuels. That speech this morning at Georgetown University. Again, you can watch that online in our video library at cspan.org. The House today has been working on a bill that reauthorizes Washington, D.C. school voucher and scholarship program, a procedural vote here on ahead of the rule vote. Now, if the rule passes, we'll have an hour more of general debate, and they'll consider one amendment, that by Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton of the District of Columbia. Off the floor, members of the House will be getting a classified briefing this afternoon on Libya. They will hear from Defense Secretary Gates, Secretary of State Clinton, and others. Senators will also get a classified briefing later on in the afternoon. On the House floor earlier today, during general speeches, Representative Dennis Kucinich said he's going to address the House tomorrow on what he called the Obama administration's, quote, Libyan war in a one-hour presentation on the House floor. That's expected on Thursday and will likely be in special orders by Dennis Kucinich. In the Senate today, they continue work on a small business and technology bill. That legislation continues two programs for small, high-tech, and research firms for 8 years with some changes. We expect a continued debate, including amendments, on that piece of legislation this afternoon. Final votes are possible by the end of the week, and of course you can follow the Senate on C-SPAN 2. The House is in the first of a series of 3 votes. This is a procedural vote, a previous question vote, ahead of the vote on the rule for debate of a bill that would reauthorize the Washington, D.C. School Voucher and Scholarship Program. It's the first bill to be brought up by House Speaker John Boehner so far this Congress. The rule would allow for an hour of general debate, and they will consider one amendment by D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton. Also on the schedule for later today, they're going to work on a bill that would prohibit the Environmental Protection Agency from requiring a permit for the use of registered pesticides in navigable waters. Later this week, tomorrow, as a matter of fact, in the House, they will turn to the FAA programs bill. This is the long-term reauthorization. They passed a short-term interim bill yesterday by a voice vote. Over in the Senate, when they got underway today, Harry Reid said that he and the Speaker, John Boehner, are in talks about the budget. Reminder that the deadline or the end date for the current temporary spending bill is next Friday, April the 8th. Politico says that Reid and Boehner mostly have stayed above the fray of partisan bickering, aides and observers say, by design and out of necessity as their staffs work with the White House to try to come to an agreement. On Friday in the House, we'll see a vote on what's being termed a largely symbolic bill dealing with a potential government shutdown after April the 8th. National Journal writes, in a purely symbolic move in the ongoing budget and spending cut negotiations, House Republicans plan to pass on Friday a measure called the Prevention of a Government Shutdown Act. Passage will do nothing to avoid a government shutdown since no deal has been reached with Democrats in the Senate and the White House, but it will give the House GOP the opportunity to claim that they've tried to prod the Senate toward a deal on spending cuts. That bill is expected Friday here in the House. This first vote almost wrapped up. The first of 3. Next vote will be a vote on the rule for a bill that would reauthorize a program that ended in 2009, a Washington, D.C. School Voucher and Scholarship Program. And that rule would allow for an hour of general debate Also an amendment to be considered by Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton of the district. That'll get 40 minutes of debate. Yesterday, the House voted 252 to 170 to repeal a Treasury Department mortgage modification program, the Home Affordable Modification Program, or HAMP, as it's been popularly called. Also yesterday, House members, Republicans on the House Financial Services Committee, introduced a couple of bills aimed at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The Hill writes about that. They say those 6 bills are aimed at reforming the mortgage giants, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, including one bill that would drastically cut pay packages for senior executives. These join 2 other bills that Republicans have already introduced. The Hill writes that the bill introduced by Committee Chairman Spencer Backus of Alabama would suspend current pay packages for Fannie and Freddie executives and set up new packages that are, quote, in accordance with rates of pay for senior employees in the executive branch of the federal government. No word on when those bills will be in committee or on the House floor, but they were introduced yesterday. Again, coming up here, more debate, the vote on the rule next for the D.C. voucher bill. Also today, a bill that would prohibit the EPA from requiring a permit for the use of pesticides, registered pesticides, in navigable waters. We understand that will get debate this afternoon, but probably not a vote. It'll be rolled into tomorrow. The House will vote next on the rules for debate for the D.C. voucher bill. David Hawkins, in his CQ roll call daily briefing, said that the D.C. voucher system, or reviving of the system, is a top Boehner legislative priority. A White House statement yesterday made clear the president opposes using federal money to pay tuition at parochial and private schools, but it did not threaten a veto, David Hawkins writes. He also writes the GOP's next move to shape policy in the nation's capital will be to force a repeal referendum on the city's gay marriage law. That from David Hawkins with CQ in his roll call briefing today.
On this vote, the yeas are 237 and the nays are 182. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution, and those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker,
the ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered, and members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
And this is the rule vote for a bill that would revive, reauthorize Washington, D.C.'s school voucher and scholarship program. If the rule is approved, we'll get an hour of general debate coming up. Also, 40 minutes to consider an amendment presented by Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton of the District of Columbia. So about an hour and 40 of debate coming up on the House floor. Looking to tomorrow on the House floor, we'll hear from Dennis Kucinich. He announced this morning during general speeches, during morning hour, that or during early speeches today, that he will call on the Obama administration's Libyan war in a 1-hour presentation on the House floor. He said, quote, "We are in the midst of a foreign policy and constitutional crisis." He said his response tomorrow to the military action would be to, quote, "be in the form of facts and questions," and said the administration has, quote, "subverted Congress and the United States Constitution." Remarks from Dennis Kucinich today about what he plans tomorrow, an hour-long speech which will most likely take the form of a special order speech sometime later in the day on Thursday. Meanwhile, there's news from the Fire Dog Lake blog about a defunding bill that's been proposed by 2 Republican congressmen, Justin Amash of Michigan and Representative Tim Johnson, introducing the Reclaim Act today to what they call, quote, "reclaim the authority to declare war that is so clearly prescribed in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. We urge all members to join our effort." And there's more there, too. All of the members today are being offered the opportunity for a classified briefing on Libya. House members this afternoon, and the Senate later on today. Defense Secretary Gates participating. Hillary Clinton, just back from the London conference on Libya, also expected to participate in classified briefings for the House and Senate.
On this vote, the yeas are 235 and the nays are 178, and the resolution is adopted. And without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, and members will record their vote by electronic device, and this will be a 5-minute vote.
The House approves the rule for debate on the Washington, D.C. debate ahead, and 40 minutes of consideration of an amendment by Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton of the district. Also today, they'll debate a bill that would prohibit the EPA from requiring a permit for the use of registered pesticides in navigable waters. On Thursday in the House, look for debate on legislation that reauthorizes the Federal Aviation Administration for 4 years. They passed a short-term measure yesterday, debating the full term, the 4-year measure, tomorrow. And then on Friday, a bill that deals with the continuing budget debate. Sam Goldfarb of CQ writes about it. He says that the House will vote on April 1st, Friday, on a bill that essentially asks the Senate to reconsider the long-term fiscal 2011 spending bill that the House passed in February. The new bill would provide that the original Republican-backed measure, that's H.R. 1, would become law if the Senate fails to pass legislation that would fund the government for the remainder of the fiscal year. It would also prevent lawmakers and President Obama from being paid for the duration of any government shutdown that lasts more than 24 hours. CQ writes, Sam Goldfarb writing that the measure would cut $61.5 billion in spending, just like H.R. 1, although 2 recent continuing resolutions have already made $10 billion of those on rollback. So that's what's ahead on Friday in the House and here on C-SPAN. Today, the Senate continues work on their small business legislation and debate on amendments to that bill as well. It's possible they could have a final vote on that before the end of the week. You can follow the Senate now. They're debating that now on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. And later today on C-SPAN 3, this evening on C-SPAN 3, it's the 67th Annual Radio and Television Correspondents' Dinner, the Congressional Correspondents' Dinner tonight at 8:45 Eastern on C-SPAN 3. And among the folks providing the entertainment, Daily Show correspondent Larry Wilmore, live on C-SPAN 3 tonight.
On this vote, the yeas are 308, the nays are